Hello, everybody. My name is Benjamin Mushabadi, and I am going to be your tutor for the day or evening, depending on the time that you are watching this video. Okay, so to get started, we're going to be looking at a few business valuation questions that will help you understand how to go about this type of questions in your exams. So, without wasting much time, let's begin with our first question here. We'll call it question one. I know it says question three here, but just for control, let's call it question one. All right. Let's begin. The question reads, Nampunde Mining Company has just paid a dividend of 1 kwacha 16 per share on its common stock. The company expects to increase the dividend at a 20% annual rate for the first 4 years and at a 13% rate for the next 4 years, and then grow the dividend at a 7% rate thereafter. This growth pattern is in keeping with the expected life cycle of earnings. You require a 16% return to invest in this stock. You require a 16% return to invest in this stock. The required section part here says, calculate the value you should place on a share of this stock. Once again, the required section says, calculate the value you should place on a share of this stock. So, obviously, we know that this is a business valuation question. So, it being a business valuation question, the next question becomes, what type of asset are we evaluating? So, you remember that we can have bonds, we can have preferred shares, and we can also have common stock, right? But in this case, already from the required part, we can say we should place on a share of this stock. So, we know that we're dealing with a common stock, right? We're dealing with a common stock or ordinary share, whichever you want to call it, or ordinary stock, right? And then remember that finding the valuation of a common stock or ordinary share requires the use of a few several models, right? So remember that we have the constant growth model, we have the no growth model, and we also have the growth phase model. So we need to identify what type of model we need to use in order to find the valuation of the stock in this particular question. So if we read through, you can see that the question says that the company expects to increase the dividend at a 20% annual rate for the first 4 years and at a 13% rate for the next 4 years, and then grow the dividend at a 7% rate thereafter. So you can see that the growth that we have here, our G, the growth, right? We have three growths here that are taking place. So three growths taking place in three different time periods. And you can see here that the model that we need to use here is our growth phase model. Growth phase model. We have three growth rates that have to be applied in three periods, three phases, right? First phase is from year 1 to year 4. Second phase is from year 5 to year 8. And the third phase is obviously taking place after year 8 going forward, maybe perhaps to infinity, right? So this is what's happening. We're doing this in phases. So this is a growth phase model. So let's begin to collect our data in order for us to answer our question. So the question here says, Nampunde company has just paid a dividend of 1 kwacha 16 gwe. So we know that our dividends on our common stock here is 1 kwacha 16 gwe. That's our dividend. Okay, that's our dividend 1 kwacha 16 gwe. And then for the first 4 years, the company expects to increase the dividend by 20%. So our G, which is the rate at which our dividends are growing for the first 4 years, right? G for the first 4 years is equals to what? 20%. 20%. So that's between year 1 and year 4. All right, from year 1 to year 4, the growth, our dividends will be growing at a growth rate of 20%. Okay, and then the question says, and at a 13% rate for the next 4 years. So after the first 4 years, the dividends will grow by 13% for the next 4 years. After the first 4 years, for the next 4 years again, the dividend will grow by 13%. So that's from year 5 all the way to year 8. So our G for next 4 years will grow at 13%. So that's from year 5 all the way to year 8. That's what we have there. So if this is a situation at hand, then we know that we have 3 phases, right? So we've found the G4, we've identified the G for 2 years. We need the third G now, the third growth rate of our dividends. So our G, right, after after the 8 years in total, so after 8 years is going to be what? Here the question says that, and then grow the dividend at a 7% rate thereafter. So after the first 4 years, the dividends are growing at 20%. The next 4 years, the dividend will be growing at 13%, and thereafter, the dividend will grow at 7%. Right? After the 8 years, the dividend will grow at 7%. This is from year 9 all the way to infinity, because we do not know when it's going to stop growing, when it's going to stop growing at 7%. Is it going to decrease further, or is it going to increase and whatnot? We have no idea. So, but for now, we know that after 8 years, our dividends will be growing at a rate of 7%. So that's from year 9 to infinity. Now we have collected our data. Wait, there's one more thing. The question here at the end, if you pay attention, it says you require a 60% return to invest in this stock. So our cost of equity, or cost of capital, which is equity in this case, is what? Is 16%. That's that. So after we've collected these, the next thing that we need to do now is calculate our dividends for each period at their given what? Growth rates. So first 4 years, the dividends are growing at 20%. The next 4 years, the dividends are growing at 13%. And after the 8 years, the dividend will grow at a rate of 7%. So we need to know the actual values of these dividends for all these years. And then we are going to have to discount these future values of the growth or the dividends to know their present value, right? Once we know their present value, once we know the present value of these dividends, we will use the present value of those dividends to find our value of our common stock. So once we know the value of the dividends when they grow, we're going to have to now discount each and every dividend for each year, right? Bringing them back to period 0 so that we know the value of these dividends today. Once we know the value of these dividends today, we can use this value to now calculate our what? The value of our common stock today. So let's just do that next. So we need to find the present value of the dividend from year 1 all the way to year 8. So to begin doing that, we're going to say 1 here. We're going to have year 1 here, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6, year 7, and year 8. So we have our years there. And then in year 1, we know that currently the dividend is what? 1 kwacha 16 gwe, as we've been given in the question. So we're going to have our 1 kwacha 16 gwe here. But then we want to know the rate at which it's growing at. And we know the rate it's growing at 20%. So if our current dividend is growing at the rate of 20% for the next 4 years, we are basically going to have to compute the value of the dividends from this point on all the way up to 4 years. So we're more or less calculating the future value of these dividends at, based on their growth rates, right? So we're calculating the future value of these dividends based on their growth rates. And remember that to calculate the future value, our formula is simply 1. So we can have our P here, sorry, which represents our present value, or our present value today, right? Sometimes it could be R, but let's call it P. So we have our P there plus R. So remember that for the first 4 years, our dividends are growing at a rate of 20%. So our RI here will be what? Will be 20% for the first 4 years. So, and you know that 20% divided by 100, if we convert it into decimals, will give us 0.2. So 1 plus 0.2, this 1 here plus 0.2 will give us how much? Will give us 1.2. So 1.2 to the power n, this is the first year, so this will be to the power 1. All right, we are going to have to calculate that. And then when we calculate, when we multiply the two, right, what are we going to have? We're going to have 1 kwacha 16 gwe multiplied by 1.2 to the power 1. So our dividend growing at the rate of 20% in the first year will be 1 kwacha 92 ngwe. All right. How about in year 2? So remember, we're going to have to use the same 1 kwacha 16 ngwe for the 4 years. So let's even just put that in advance. And everything is going to be the same. The only thing that's going to change is going to be our powers with the formula we're using to calculate the growth of our dividend. So we are going to have 1 kwacha 16 ngwe, 1.2 to the power 2, 1 kwacha 16 ngwe multiplied by, let's remove this here, multiplied by 1.2 to the power 3, and then finally in the last year at which the growth at which the dividends are going at uh, at 20%, we're going to have 1 kwacha 16 ngwe, 1.2 to the power 4. So let's calculate that. 1 kwacha 60 times 1.2 to the power 2. That will give us what? 2 kwacha 30 ngwe. So 2 kwacha 30 ngwe. And then in the third year, we're going to have 1 kwacha 16 ngwe multiplied by 1.2 to the power 3. And that will give us 2 kwacha 76 ngwe. Okay, 2 kwacha 76 ngwe is what we have. And then we're going to do for the final year 1 kwacha 16 ngwe multiplied by 1.2 to the power 4. And we're going to have 3 kwacha 31 ngwe. Actually 32, so it will give us 3 kwacha 0.317. So if we round off the 7, it will give us 3 kwacha 32 ngwe. So these are our dividends for the first 4 years, growing at the rate of 20%. So you've seen we've used the same current dividend as our P here. If you look at our formula there, our P is going to be the same, 1 kwacha 16 ngwe throughout from year 1 to year 4. We're going to multiply them by the same growth rate, right? 1.2, 1.2, 1.2 to more like find the future values of these dividends growing at a rate of 20%. So we have 1 kwacha 92 ngwe for the first year, 2 kwacha 30 ngwe, 2 kwacha 76, and 3 kwacha 32 ngwe for year 4. How about for year 5, year 6, year 7, year 8? Remember the question says that, and at a 13% rate for the next 4 years. So after the first 4 years, the next 4 years will grow, the dividends of the next 4 years will grow at a rate of 13%. So remember that at the end of year 4, our total dividend is what? 3 kwacha 32 ngwe. So this 3 kwacha 32 ngwe is what we are going to start with in year 5. So and we're going to use it as our what? As our P here. So we're going to have 3 kwacha 32 ngwe multiplied by what? We're going to have 1 plus 0.13, and that will give us 1.13 as our future value factor, right? So 1.13 to the power what? 1. We're not going to say to the power 5 in this case. We're going to say to the power 1, because when we start the next 4 years, it's like we're starting from 1 again, right? We are not going to continue 5, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No. With regards to the powers, please pay attention. With regards to the powers, since we are starting with a new phase, we're going to get our total dividend from the previous phase, and we're going to now have our first period in the new phase or in the second phase starting from 1 again. So we have 3 kwacha 32 ngwe multiplied by 1.13 to the power 1 there. And then we're going to use the same 3 kwacha 32 ngwe again. So we're going to have 3 kwacha 32 ngwe. This is a new phase, so it's like we're doing things all over again. 1 kwacha 13 ngwe, or 1.13 to the power 2, and then 3 kwacha 32 ngwe multiplied by 1.13 to the power 3, and then 3 kwacha 32 ngwe multiplied by 1.13 to the power 4 equals. Alright, so let's find our dividends that are growing at a rate of 13%. So we're going to say 3 kwacha 32 ngwe times 1.13. So 3 kwacha 32 ngwe times 1.13 to the power 1. That will give us what? 3 kwacha 75. 3 kwacha 75 ngwe. How about in the second period of the second phase? Right, so we're going to have 3 kwacha 32 ngwe times 1.13 to the power 2. We're going to have 4 kwacha point 24. 4 kwacha point 24, or 4 kwacha 24 ngwe. That's what we're going to have. And then 3 kwacha 32 ngwe multiplied by 1.13 to the power 3, we're going to have how much? We're going to have 4 kwacha 79 ngwe. We're going to have 4 kwacha 79 ngwe. And then finally, in the last year of the second phase, we're going to have 3 kwacha 32 ngwe multiplied by 1.13 to the power what? To the power 4. This will give us how much? It will give us 5 kwacha 41 ngwe. This is basically our final what? Dividend growing at the rate of 13% in the year 8. Okay, so we're dealing with two different phases here, right? Since we're dealing, so the first phase, when we're looking at the power, with the power in particular, when we're looking at the power, right? In the first phase, we are going to start, since each phase has 4 years, right? The first two phases have 4 years each. So for the first phase, with regards to the powers, we're going to start 1, 2, 3, 4, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, right? To the power 1, to the power 2, to the power 3, to the power 4. And when we get into the second phase, it's like we are starting again. We're starting another phase. So when we're starting another phase, we're going to start from 1 again. So we're going to start to the power 1, to the power 2, to the power 3, to the power 4. And this is what we've done here, right? So this is phase 1 up to here. And then phase 2 will start from here up to there. So we are done with finding the future value of our dividends at their particular growth rates in the first two phases, right? In the first two phases. So now we need to discount these cash flows, or we need to discount these dividends back so that we know their present values. And then we calculate their total present value. And then we'll use that present value to basically calculate the valuation of our common stock. So let's do that. So we're going to use, for simplicity's sake, obviously you're going to be given your present value interest factor table in your exam. If they don't, like they did in your test, then you need to know the formulas. But it's just a must, they have to give you, right? Because it's time and you need something that will help you solve things quicker. So once you're given the present value interest factor table, remember that you have the present value interest factor table, and you also have the present value interest factor table of an annuity. So in this case, we're not dealing with annuities. We're dealing with what? Just the present value. So if we're using the present value, we're just going to use the ordinary present value table. So we're going to discount these guys according to this present value interest factor table. But at what rate? Remember that our cost of capital is what? Is 16%. We're not going to use our growth rates. We're going to use our what? Our rate of return here. You require a 16% return to investment. So we're going to use our 16% rate of return to discount these dividends back to our our present time, right? And so for year 1, if we look at our present value interest factor table, we're going to go to where it says 16%. And when we go to 16%, we're going to period 1, or to year 1. So we're going to where n is equals to 1, or period 1, or year 1. So 16% period 1, our present value interest factor table will be what? 0.862. 0.862. This is our present value interest factor for year 1. How about for year 2? Again, we're going to go back to 16% and say 0.731. Sorry, 0.4743. That will be our present value interest factor for year 2, 743. Remember, at the rate of 16%, year 1, the present value interest factor will be 0.862. In year 2, the present value interest factor will be 0.743. And then you see the trend is going to go on. We're going to get the present value interest factor for each particular year. So from year 1 all the way up to year 8. All right. So the first year is 0.862. Second year is 0.743 at the rate of 16%. And then the third year will give us what? 0.641. And then the fourth year will give us 0.552. And then the 60th year, or the fifth year, sorry, the fifth year will give us a present value interest factor of 0.476. And then in the year 6, it will give us a present value of 0.410. Year 7, it will give us 0.354. And then in year 8, it will give us a present value interest factor of 0.305. So these are our present value interest factors that we, at the rate of 16%, that we are going to use to basically discount each dividends that have grown at 20% and 13% respectively, right? We discount them, we know their present value. Once we know their present value, we calculate their total present value. We calculate the total present value of these dividends, and then we can now use the value. We can now use the present value of these dividends to calculate our what? To calculate the valuation of our common stock, or the value of our common stock. So let's do that. So when we multiply this present value interest factor of 0.862 times 1.92, which is the dividend in year 1 that has grown at 20%, so 1 kwacha 92 ngwe times 0.862 will give us a present value of 1 kwacha 66 ngwe. All right, and then we'll do the same for year 2. So 0.743, which is the present value interest factor for year 2, times our dividend for year 2, which is 2 kwacha 13 ngwe, and that will give us a present value of 1 kwacha 71 ngwe. So we're going to do this for all the years. So we're just going to multiply the present factor plus this dividend, present factor plus the dividend here, present factor, dividend, present factor, dividend, present factor, dividend, present factor, dividend. And when we calculate all these, our answer is going to be 1 kwacha 77 ngwe in the third year. Fourth year, we're going to have 1 kwacha 83 ngwe. Fifth year, we're going to have 1 kwacha 79 ngwe. 60th year, we're going to have 1 kwacha 74 ngwe, and so we're going to have 1 kwacha 17 ngwe in the 7th year, and finally in the 8th year, we're going to have 1 kwacha 65 ngwe. And then when we sum up the total of these present values in each year, we're going to have a total present value of 13 kwacha 85 ngwe. So this is our total present value. So we now have this total present value here, which we're going to use in part to basically come up with a value of our stock. But there's a little bit more that we have to do, because remember, we haven't yet accounted for the growth of the dividend that comes after year 8, which is growing at the rate of 7%. So we also have to calculate for that. For that, we're going to have to do it on this next part. So what are we going to do? We say that our dividends after 8 years are going to grow at the rate of what? Of 7%. And if our dividends at the end of 8 years are growing at the rate of 7%, we need to get our final dividend, or our total dividend, at the end of year 8. What is our total dividend at the end of year 8? Our total dividend at the end of year 8 is this here, 5 kwacha 41 ngwe. To find our dividend at end of year 9, we need to use our dividend at the end of year 8. So our dividend at the end of year 8 is what? 5 kwacha 41 ngwe. So that'll be 5 kwacha 41 ngwe. And remember that we need to find the future value of this dividend at a growth rate of 7%, right? So if this dividend here, that is at the end of year 8, has to grow at what? At the rate of 7% thereafter. So starting from year 9 all the way to whatever period. So it will be growing at 7%. So we're going to do the same. We're going to use our formula here. That will be 1. Remember that 7% in decimal form is what? 0.07. So 1 plus 0.07 will give us 1.07. But to what power becomes the question. And we know that we're dealing with a period after period, or after year 8, and the growth rate. And the question here says that and then grow the dividend at a 7% rate thereafter. So there's no defined period, right? If there's no defined period, that means that our growth rate, or rather our power here, or our time period, is going to be nothing because it's not defined. So it's going to be more like a perpetual growth in dividends. So we're going to have 5.41 or 41 gray multiplied by 1.07 to the power nothing, right? So when we calculate this, what we are going to get is 5 kwacha 79 gray. So this is going to be our final dividend that grows thereafter at the rate of 7%. So now let's calculate our value of stock at the end of year 8. Let's calculate our value of stock at the end of year 8. All right, so this is what we're going to do now. So in order for us to calculate our value of stock at the end of year 8, what we're going to have is this formula, right? If you remember it from your notes, so we're going to have V is equals to the dividend, and this is the dividend at the end of year 9, and remember that this is our dividend here, so that's going to be D9 divided by our cost of capital, which is 16%, minus our growth rate, right? So we know that our dividend at the end of year 9 is what? Is 5 kwacha 79. So we're using our dividend at the end of year 9 to calculate the value of our stock at the end of year 8. So if we're using our dividend at the end of year 9, which is 5.79 way, we're going to have our cost of capital there, which we've been given in our question as 16% right there. So we have 16%. So 16% in decimal form is just basically 0.16 minus our growth rate, which is what? 0.7. So 0.07 is what we're going to have there. All right, let's simplify this. So on top again, we're still going to have 5 kwacha 79 gray as our dividend at the end of year 9, and then 0.16 minus 0.07 is going to give us 0.09. 0.09. So our value of stock, right? Our value of stock at the end of year 8, after using the dividend at the end of year 9, and our growth rate of 0.07, as well as our cost of capital of 16%, which is 0.16, we are going to have a value of stock at the end of year 8, which is kwacha 64.33 ngwe. We're going to have 64 kwacha 33 ngwe as our value of stock at the end of what? Year 8. And then once we found that, remember that the whole goal is to find our value of the stock in the current period. We need to find the present value of our stock in the current period. So we're going to have to discount the 64 kwacha to what? To period 0. We're going to have to discount this 64 kwacha to period 0. So we're discounting our the value of our common stock at the end of year 8 to down to period 0, to period 1 rather, right? So let's do that. So our present value, so we're going to have PV, present value of 64 kwacha 33 ngwe at end of year 8, right? So if we calculate this, all we're going to do here is simply use our formula, our present value interest factor formula. So we're going to have present value here is equals to what? Our V, which is our valuation here at the end of year 8, which is 64, right? And then multiply it by our present value interest factor at the rate of, so we're discounting it at the rate of 16%. With what period? With what n? Our n is going to be 8 here. This is what we're doing. So let's quickly calculate that. So our V is going to be what? 64. 64 kwacha 33 ngwe. And then our present value interest factor is going to be what? So on our table, we're going to go down to 16%, right? We're going to go down to 16%, and then at 16%, we're going to go down to year 8. So on our present value interest factor table, not for the annuity, but the one for the present value interest factor table. So 16% down to period 8 or year 8, because remember we are discounting what? We're discounting the value of the common stock at the end of year 8. So the value of the common stock at the end of year 8, we discount it back to what? To period 1 or period 0, to the present value, period 0 actually. So if we're discounting it back to period 0, that means that our number of periods is going to be 8, and then our cost of capital, or basically our discounting factor in this case will be what? Will be 16%. So 16% down to year 8, that will give us a discounting factor of 0.305. 0.305. That's what we have there. And then when we multiply the two, we are going to have, let's just do this from here. We're going to have a present value of how much? We're going to have a present value of 19 kwacha 16 tungwe. 19 kwacha 60 tungwe. That's our present value after we discount the value of the common stock at the end of year 8. So this is our present value after we discount the value of the common stock at the end of year 8. So that 64.33 ngwe times 0.305, which is our discount factor at the rate of 16%, and the period of 8 will give us 19 kwacha 62 ngwe. That's that. Now, it doesn't just end here. To find the total value of our common stock, we need to add the present value of our dividends within the period of 8 years, which we calculated in the beginning, this total present value of our dividends, plus this present value of our what? Of our common stock at the end of 8 years. So we need to add the two in order for us to now find the actual value of our stock. So we add this present value to this present value of our dividends within the period of 8 years. So when we do that, we're going to find the value of our stock. So value of stock is equals to 13 kwacha 85 ngwe. This is for the present value for the dividends, plus 19 kwacha 62 ngwe, which is the present value of what? Which is the present value of our common stock, which was discounted from 8 years down to period 0. So that's 19 kwacha 62 ngwe. When we add the two, it will give us a total value of 33 kwacha 47 ngwe. This is the total value of our common stock. And we've answered the question just like that. If we look at the Nampunde question and how we've basically solved it, there's another question that can be brought that has to be solved in a much similar manner. And that question is this one here. So sometimes the name of the company here might change. You see here we have Hamambo Mulenga PLC. So the name of the company here might change, but always you're going to have these two names, Jackson and Mwika. And so I like to call the question the Jackson and Mwika question. So it's a similar question to the Nampunde question. And we use the growth phase model to answer it. So we use the growth phase model to answer it. So using the principles that we've basically used here, right? The principles, the concepts that we've used to calculate the Nampunde question, you're going to have to use the same principles to calculate this particular question. So I believe the question and the solutions to this particular question have been provided using the link in the description of this video, right? So the question and the solutions to this question have been provided in the description of this video. So just click the link and you'll be able to find the question and the solutions. You can download the document and quickly just go through it. All right, just in case it is also one of the questions that may come, so you can go through it to ensure that you are safe in all areas. So we've come to the end of this video. Thank you very much for your time and see you in the next one.